The fool. His feet left the soft cushion of the dirt and took solidarity upon the bridge. It had rained the night before, so he had to be careful of his steps lest he fall. But he was a fairly spry young man who shouldn't have much trouble unless something spooked him proper. The ark hanging over it blocked out the light from the moon, leaving him in utter darkness. That was exactly what he wanted. Exactly what he needed. The sounds of the night persisted. The throat-filled croak of the frog, the incessant questions of the owl, and the chirping of crickets. He was a superstitious person, but he'd been out in the night enough times to find comfort in these noises. They were familiar sounds, calm greetings from old friends that did a little to ease his mind of the dreadful stories about things that went bump in the night. Still, the story lingered in the back of his mind, probing at his neck like elongated fingernails. He wasn't sure which happened first, the shaking of the wooden bridge beneath his feet or the muffled stomp. Whichever it was, it prompted him to jump and he nearly turned his head, but the last lingering echo of the story still rang in his mind. He kept his face forward. The steady quadro click of the hoofs coming against the bridge, coupled by that ungodly shake, persisted behind him. The sounds of the night had changed. The crickets no longer chirped, they screamed, screeched in horror like a knife was being driven into them. They drowned out all other sounds aside from the stomp of the horse hooves, which seemed to break through all other noise. The horse moved at no more than a light jog, but it was no doubt gaining on him. He quickened his pace. He was maybe halfway through the tunnel now, the light from the moon illuminating particles of dust on the other end that drifted in the late autumn wind. The horse still beat against the ground behind him and was no doubt only a few feet away. He could feel its hot breath against the back of his neck, traveling down his spine like a sudden chill. There was a laugh, which appeared to come from behind him but far away at the same time, as if it originated from the bottom of a deep well that was inches from his ear. An insufferable, empty void. The inside of that creature. He nearly turned his head at the suddenness of it all, but again the story rang in his head, and he faced forward and picked up his pace. The horseman would not have him. Not today. Its temptations persisted, but he refused to turn his head. The whispers that surrounded him on all sides, the inquiries of the little girl, the constant nudges and taps on his shoulder, all ignored. There were calls to his side, screaming for him to turn his head. He was shoved, pushed, and knocked all over. It knew he knew the defense of such things and was trying its damnedest to win at its own game. He covered his ears, shut his eyes, and continued forward with uneasy paces. His foot caught the ground, but it seemed to slip underneath him, and he found himself falling back on the ground. The back of his head hit the wooden plank with a sharp bite of pain which quickly buzzed over. In his shocked surprise he had opened his eyes, and now his mouth hung agape as he stared at the blackness in front of him, where the horseman no doubt lingered within the shadows. Something lightly floated upon his chest, but he paid it no notice. His eyes locked upon the shifting darkness, fully expecting a hand to reach out and grasp him. Seconds passed, and nothing came. He could hear the steady breathing of the horse, feel its hot breath ruffling his overcoat, but still nothing came. It was so dark he couldn't see. A twisted smile curled up his lips as he grabbed what had landed on his chest. A downed leaf, slippery from the rain, had caused his fall. How hilarious! He kicked up and rose to his feet in the most graceful way he could manage. The presence of the demon hardly bothered him now. In fact, he turned around to give the horse a good pat on the nozzle. He felt the hot breath along his fingertips, but when he moved to where the snout would be, his hand found nothing. Perhaps nothing was not the correct word, as he did feel a slight chill in the air in the spot, a temperature drop perhaps, but that was it. He pivoted around on his heels, fixed his misplaced overcoat, and continued forward. The footfalls of the horse still followed, however they were notably slower. And did he feel the breath transfer from his neck to his spine? No doubt the horse held its head low, disappointed on an unsuccessful catch, as did its master. "Sorry to disappoint you, old chap," he called into the empty void, his voice echoing and returning to him. "But I won't be a meal for you tonight. No, I won't, so just head on home." He waited a few seconds for the footfalls to fade into the distance, but they did not. He turned around and headed for the exit, which was no more than 10 feet behind him. "So you're in it for the long haul, eh? No worries, it's a spooky bridge late at night, so I appreciate the company." He stepped forward with long, happy strides, still hearing the horse fall behind him, but he didn't care in the slightest. The wind from the other end of the tunnel blew in and rustled his hair like a comforting hand. He opened his eyes and saw the moonlight shining into puddles on the ground at the edge of the bridge, but it didn't extend inside enough to illuminate it. What luck! When he was no more than 2 feet from the exit, he turned sharply, gave the demon an eccentric bow, then headed for the exit. His foot hit a puddle at the bottom and sprayed water into the air. He glanced at his reflection cast in the floating water, and, for an instant, that dark horse. Its red eyes were glowing. The headless rider sat patiently atop it, with his arms folded. He'd seen it. It took him.